the morning after my granddaughter's birthday. I stood in my daughter's kitchen, holding a casserole dish I never finished washing, and I kept seeing the same picture over and over. My granddaughter Whitney, 6 years old, sitting cross-legged on the carpet at my house, while her cousins tore through wrapping paper 3 feet away from her, and her hands stayed completely empty. She didn't cry. She just watched, the way kids watch things they don't understand yet. Like if she paid close enough attention the world would explain itself to her. Then she looked up at her mother and asked the question I still hear when I close my eyes. "Did I do something wrong, Mommy?" I didn't answer for her that night, but 2 days later, I answered for both of us, standing in my own dining room with a folder in my hands, and by the time I was done talking, 43 years of being the convenient one in this family had finally come apart. Not because I screamed. I have never once raised my voice at my own children, not in 43 years, and I wasn't about to start now. It came apart because I had finally done the arithmetic, out loud in front of witnesses, and I was done being generous about it. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I'm 56 years old. I live just outside Kitchener, Ontario, in the same house I raised my 2 children in, and until that birthday party in May, I would have told you I was the most reasonable, even-tempered woman in my entire extended family. My ex-husband used to say I had the patience of a saint and the spine of a dish rag, which I always laughed off, because what else was I supposed to do with a comment like that, from a man who left when our youngest was 11? I have 2 children. My son Tyler is 31, lives in Calgary, works in oil and gas, calls me twice a year and means well both times. And my daughter, Brienne, is 29, married to a man named Colin. And she lives 20 minutes from me with their 2 kids. Whitney, who just turned 6, and her little brother Mason, who's 3, my other daughter-in-law. Tyler's wife, Priya, has 3 kids of her own from her first marriage, and over the years, somehow without anyone ever sitting down and deciding it out loud, those 3 grandchildren became the magic. The big gifts. The matching outfits for every holiday photo. The we just couldn't help ourselves purchases. And Whitney and Mason became the ones who got cards. I want to be honest about my part in this, because I think that matters. I didn't start it, but I let it keep going. Because keeping the peace has always been my specialty, my unpaid, unthanked, full-time specialty. I was the second of 3 girls growing up in Cambridge, Ontario, and my mother used to say I was the sturdy one, which she meant kindly, the way you'd describe a good pair of winter boots. My older sister was the pretty one. My younger sister was the clever one. I was the one who didn't need anything, who never made a fuss, who could be counted on. So I made myself useful instead. I got a diploma in bookkeeping at Conestoga College, and by the time I was 30 I was managing the finances for half my extended family. Informally, because that's how it always starts. A favor here. A spreadsheet there. Pretty soon I was doing my mother's taxes every spring, free of charge, and after she passed, I started doing the same thing for my brother-in-law, Garth, because his business was a mess and nobody else in the family understood a balance sheet from a grocery list. For 9 years, I kept the books for Garth's landscaping company. I filed his HST returns. I caught an accounting error in year 4 that would have cost him close to $14,000 in penalties from the CRA. I helped him and my sister restructure their mortgage in 2019 when interest rates were climbing, which saved them roughly $11,000 over the life of the loan. I helped my own mother set up her will and her power of attorney documents before she died, free of charge, the way I'd helped Garth, the way I'd helped everyone, because that's what you do for family. That's what I always told myself. That's what family does. I never once sent an invoice. Not to my sister, not to Garth, not to my own mother. I was the sturdy one. I didn't need the magic. That's a direct quote, by the way. My sister Patricia said those exact words to me on the day of Whitney's birthday party, standing in my own backyard with a glass of white wine in her hand. You've never needed the extra fuss, Eleanor. You're just not that kind of person. And that sentence is the one that ended my silence, after 43 years of practicing it. Let me set the scene properly, because I think the details matter. I hosted Whitney's 6th birthday at my house this year, the way I host most family gatherings. Because I have the backyard for it, and because frankly nobody else volunteers. I spent 3 days getting ready. I baked a vanilla cake with strawberry filling, because that's Whitney's favorite. I blew up 40 balloons until my lungs ached. I set up a little fating station because she'd been asking for one since Easter. I am not a wealthy woman. I live on a modest pension from my years at the credit union, plus what I still bring in doing books for 2 small businesses. But I spent close to $300 on that party. Because it was for my granddaughter. And I wanted it to be perfect for her. My sister Patricia and her husband Garth came with their grandkids. Priya's 3 children from her first marriage, who I should say are lovely kids. None of this is their fault, ages 5, 7 and 10. When they walked in, Garth was carrying 2 enormous gift bags stuffed with tissue paper, the kind that costs $40 before you've even put anything inside them. I noticed it right away, the same flutter of unease I always got, and always pushed down. I told myself, as I always told myself, that I was imagining things, that I was being petty, that there was nothing wrong with grandparents being excited about grandchildren. At gift time, Whitney sat on the porch step with Mason on her lap, and I watched her watch her cousins open a tablet, a full art easel with paints and brushes, a remote control helicopter, and matching friendship bracelet kits, with each girl's name engraved on a little charm. My sister had ordered them from somewhere online weeks in advance. There was a small mountain of wrapping paper by the time it was over. Whitney's gift, from her great-aunt and great-uncle, was a $5 bill folded inside a card that said, "Happy birthdays, sweet girl," in Patricia's handwriting. Whitney didn't say anything. She folded the bill very carefully and put it in the little purse she'd gotten as a party favor from her own mother. She kept smiling. She is like her grandmother apparently, a very good actress for her age. Later, when most of the guests had gone and Brienne was packing leftover cake into containers in my kitchen, I saw Patricia pull Whitney aside near the gate to say goodbye. I wasn't trying to listen. I was carrying a folding chair. But I heard her say, clear as anything, "Oh sweetheart, you know your grandma takes such good care of you already. You don't need all that fuss like your cousins do. You're our practical girl." She squeezed Whitney's cheek and got in the car. I stood there holding a lawn chair in the middle of my own backyard, and something in me just stopped. Whitney walked over to me a minute later, her little purse clutched against her chest, and she looked up and asked me, very quietly, the way kids ask things they're almost afraid to ask, "Grandma, is it because I'm not as good as them?" I knelt down right there on the grass, ruined my good slacks doing it, and I held her by both shoulders and told her she was the very best thing in this whole family, and I meant every word, and I promised her. Silently, to myself, not out loud, because I didn't want to make a scene in front of a 6-year-old, that this would be the last time anyone made her feel small in front of me. That night, after everyone left and Brienne and the kids had gone home, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea going cold beside me, and I opened the old accordion file folder where I keep my client records, the same folder I've used since 2009. I am not an emotional person by nature, or at least that's the story I've always told about myself. I am a numbers person. So that's what I did. I pulled numbers. 9 years of bookkeeping for Garth's landscaping business. My standard rate when I started in 2015 was $35 an hour. By this year it had climbed to $55, which is honestly still below market for a CPA-adjacent bookkeeper in this region. But I'm not a CPA, I never finished that designation. Life got in the way, so I've always undercharged everyone including, apparently, myself. I averaged it out conservatively to $42 an hour across the 9 years. Monthly bookkeeping and reconciliation, roughly 6 hours a month, that's 72 hours a year. HST filing and remittance 4 times a year, another 20 hours annually. Year-end financial statements and tax prep, 28 hours. The 2017 CRA penalty issue I caught and fixed, 19 hours of digging through 3 years of receipts. The 2019 mortgage restructuring, 31 hours between paperwork, phone calls, and meetings with the bank. Call it an average of 140 hours a year across the 9 years conservatively. Because there were slow years and there were brutal years. I multiplied it out twice to be sure. 140 hours a year, times 9 years, times $42. The number on my notepad came to $52,920. Then there was my mother's estate. I drafted her will with her, free of charge, sat with her at the kitchen table, for an entire winter, going through every account and asset, made sure her power of attorney documents were airtight, so that nothing would be left to chance. I never billed her either, because she was my mother, and you don't send your mother an invoice. But I knew exactly what that kind of estate planning work was worth, because I'd seen what a lawyer charges for it. Conservatively, another $4,000 in unpaid labor, just for that one project. $56,920. That was the number. That was the price of being the sturdy one, the practical one, the one who doesn't need the extra fuss. I sat with that number for a long time. Then I did something else. 3 years ago, when my mother passed, I had been named sole executor and power of attorney over what remained of her small estate, a modest GICs, a life insurance payout, and her half of a cottage property up near Bala that she co-owned with my Aunt Vivian, which had been left in trust with me managing the paperwork until Vivian's own affairs were settled. I had never misused that authority, not for $1, not for one day. I am not that kind of person. But that night, sitting at my table, I understood for the first time exactly how much trust had been placed in my hands, and exactly how little anyone in that family had ever placed in return. I wasn't going to do anything underhanded with it. That's not who I raised myself to be, even without a mother to finish the job for me. But I was going to resign from every single piece of unpaid responsibility I'd been quietly carrying for this family, loudly, formally, in writing, with witnesses. And I was going to hand Patricia and Garth an invoice on my way out the door. I typed it up that night on my old laptop at the kitchen table, the same laptop I use for my actual paying clients. I made it look exactly like any other invoice I'd send a business, itemized, dated, professional. Nothing dramatic about the formatting at all, which somehow made it feel more serious, not less. I attached a summary letter. I kept the tone businesslike because that's the only voice I trust myself to use when I'm furious. The first line read, "Dear Patricia and Garth, please find enclosed an invoice for bookkeeping and financial advisory services rendered between 2015 and 2024. Effective immediately, I am also resigning from any informal financial advisory role I have held for this family, including matters related to Mom's estate, and will be referring all future inquiries to a licensed accountant of your choosing." I printed 2 copies. I set my alarm for 7, and for the first time since that birthday party, I slept the whole night through without waking up once. 2 days later, on a Tuesday, I drove to Patricia and Garth's place in Waterloo, the house I'd practically helped them keep through that mortgage refinance. I left a message for Brienne to watch Mason for a couple hours. Didn't tell her why. I wore my navy blazer, the one I usually save for client meetings, because some mornings you put on the closest thing you own to armor and you go. Patricia answered the door already mid-sentence. Something about not expecting me on a weekday. And I told her I needed 20 minutes. That's all. And could Garth come into the kitchen too? Garth came in wiping his hands on a dish towel, looking the way he always looks, like a man who's never once worried about anything because somebody else has always worried for him. "Everything all right, Ellie?" he asked. I set the envelope on their kitchen island. "I need the 2 of you to open this together," I said. Patricia pulled out the invoice first. I watched her face change in real time, the way the color drains out of someone when a number doesn't match the story they've been telling themselves. "What is this?" she said. Not even really a question. "It's an invoice," I said, "for 9 years of bookkeeping, tax filing, and financial advisory work, itemized with my standard hourly rate applied conservatively below current market. $56,920. Garth actually laughed, the short nervous kind of laugh people do when they don't know what else their face is supposed to do. "Eleanor, come on. That's family stuff. We're family." "I am aware we're family," I said. "I've spent 9 years being aware of it on your behalf. Free of charge. While you and Patricia spent $400 on birthday gifts for 3 grandchildren, and handed my granddaughter a $5 bill folded into a card." The kitchen went very quiet. Patricia set the invoice down like it had gotten hot in her hands. "We're not made of money, Eleanor. You know that. You know our situation with Priya's kids, with everything they've been through." "I do know your situation," I said. "I helped you build the spreadsheet for it. What I didn't know until 2 days ago was that my granddaughter would sit on my porch step and ask me if she's not as good as her cousins. She's 6, Patricia." She folded a $5 bill into her little purse and said thank you. Because that's how well I've taught her to be agreeable about things that should never have happened to her in the first place. Garth's jaw tightened the way men's jaws do when they're about to say something they'll regret, and then thought better of it. We explained that to her. You told a 6-year-old she doesn't need all that fuss because she's the practical one, I said. I heard you say it, word for word by the gate. Nobody spoke for what felt like a full minute. I pulled the second piece of paper out of the envelope. Effective today, I said. I'm resigning from all unpaid bookkeeping and advisory work for this family. That includes the landscaping's business. And it includes any remaining administrative matters tied to Mom's estate and the cottage trust. I'd recommend hiring a licensed accountant. I can give you 2 names if you'd like, people I trust, who will of course charge you their normal rate, which I never did. You can't just walk away from Mom's estate paperwork in the middle of. Patricia started. I can, I said. And I am. The remaining items are minor and I've left detailed notes in the file folder. I'll be dropping off at your place by Friday. After that, you're on your own. The way every other client of mine has always been on their own unless they're paying me. I picked my purse up off the counter. This invoice isn't a demand, I said. I know you're not going to write me a check for $56,000, and frankly that was never really the point of bringing it. It's a record. It's me finally putting a number on what practical has cost me for 9 years. So that the next time somebody in this family calls me sturdy or self-sufficient like it's a compliment, we'll all know exactly what that word has actually said. I was almost to the door when Garth said my name. I turned around. He looked for the first time since I've known him, and I've known him since I was 26 years old, genuinely rattled. Not angry, rattled. Did we really make Whitney feel that way? He asked. Yes, I said, you did. And I left. I won't pretend the drive home felt triumphant, because it didn't. My hands shook on the steering wheel the whole way back to Kitchener. And I sat through a green light at the corner of Ottawa and Homer Watson for an extra few seconds before a car behind me honked. And I finally moved. Doing the right thing, I've learned, rarely feels the way it does in the movies. It mostly just feels like fear with better posture. What happened over the following weeks, though, I genuinely did not see coming. Within 2 days, Priya called me. Tyler's wife, the one whose kids had gotten the helicopter and the easel and the bracelet kits, none of which was ever her doing or her children's fault. She'd apparently heard a heavily edited version of events from Patricia, and the call started awkward and ended somewhere I didn't expect. Halfway through, she went quiet and said, "Did Patricia really tell Whitney she didn't need the fuss?" Word for word, I said. A long pause. "That's not okay, Eleanor," she said. "That's not okay at all." She called Whitney that same week and sent her a little charm bracelet of her own, nothing extravagant. Just a small gesture that said, "You matter too." It wasn't a grand thing. It was real. And Whitney wore it to school the next day, and told her teacher her Auntie Priya had sent it just for her. About 3 weeks after the Kitchen Island conversation, Garth called and asked if he could take Whitney out. Just the 2 of them. Her choice of where. He's not a man built for apologizing outright. That would require a different kind of upbringing than the one he had. But he showed up at Brienne's place, with a little stuffed beaver from the gift shop at the Science Center, and took Whitney for ice cream, at the place by the lake. Let her get 3 scoops. Even though Brienne raised an eyebrow at me about it later. He told her she was his granddaughter too and that he loved her. And that he was sorry she ever felt like she wasn't enough. She came home and told her mother, very seriously. Uncle Garth said sorry and he let me get sprinkles and a waffle cone. Patricia hasn't called me directly since that Tuesday morning. I think she's still working through what she feels about all of it. And honestly, that's fine. I'm still working through what I feel too. I've since handed off my 2 remaining paying bookkeeping clients to a friend's firm in Cambridge. And I started, for the first time in years, paying someone else to do my own taxes, which felt strange and a little extravagant and, underneath all that, surprisingly good. I don't want to wrap this up like I've got it all figured out because I don't. I'm 56 years old and I'm still learning things about myself that I probably should have learned 30 years ago. But here's what I do know now. The most dangerous role you can be handed in a family is the one labeled sturdy, or practical, or low maintenance. There's nothing wrong with being dependable. Being the person others can count on is a real and good thing. The problem starts the moment a family decides that your dependability is a resource to be quietly extracted, rather than a quality to be valued and protected. I spent 43 years grateful that my family needed me. I never once stopped to ask whether they valued me. Those are not the same question, and they do not have the same answer. And it took a 6-year-old folding a $5 bill into a tiny purse to teach me the difference. Children notice everything, even when we think they're too young to. Whitney felt the gap between herself and her cousins long before she had the words for it. And she did what children do. She turned it inward, made it about her own worth instead of about the adults who failed her. No child should ever have to ask if they did something wrong, just to deserve to be treated kindly by their own family. The morning I walked into Patricia and Garth's kitchen with that envelope, I wasn't only settling something for myself. I was showing Whitney, even though she wasn't there to see it, what it looks like to stop apologizing for taking up space in your own family. I was showing her that love without fairness isn't really love, it's just habit dressed up nicely for the holidays. She's 6. She doesn't know the details and she doesn't need to. But someday, when she's grown, I want her to look back and understand that her grandmother chose her dignity over keeping the family comfortable. And that this is, in fact, allowed. So I'll leave you with this. Because I think a lot of you already know exactly who I'm talking about in your own life. Is there someone who's been quietly counting on your reliability? Calling you practical or easygoing while expecting you to carry weight they were never willing to carry themselves? And if you finally put it down, what would it actually cost them? And what has it already cost you? This is Lyra Payback. Because real justice always starts with finally knowing your own worth.